This Sunday, every year we start out with some kind of a series. I try to alternate it, talking about healthy habits to start the year, finances. And you know me, I hate talking about money, especially at church. I remember the first time I ever preached about this in 2009, Teddy Lester's dad, Mitchell, and his mama, Joyce, had came here to visit for the first time, and they were sitting right here where Bobby and Pat is. And it happened to be a Sunday that I was talking about wise financial habits in our own personal lives and in church. And after the service, Mitchell walked out, and I was shaking his hand, and he shook his hand and said, "Preacher," he said, "I love it here. I love it here." He said, "But Daryl, you know what your brother said." He said, "I love it here, but I thought when I retired I didn't have to give no more." And he said, "But because I love it here, we're going to keep coming here. We're going to make this our church home. I realized that I got to give money now to God." And he faithfully gave above and beyond to this church for many years, and now he's reaping his reward in heaven. But I don't like talking about money. I don't even like talking about it with my wife. I just don't like money. But it is very biblical. So you see on the screen there, 10-10-80. We're going to talk about a series. Last year we talked about atomic habits, and one thing is called a keystone habit. It's a big habit that you place in your life at the beginning of the year, and it will pay dividends throughout the year to come. It will set you up in a good position if you follow this 10-10-80 come December. And if you follow this, just say it works. You'll end the year in a good position financially in your personal life. And so we're going to start today with this 10-10-80 series. Some people were asking me this week, I was sharing with them what I was talking about, what we're going to be preaching about. They're like, "Well, what's that mean?" One person said, "Is that 10-10-80? Is that the special fertilizer that Bobby Nance uses in his garden?" I'm like, "No, I think that's 10-10-10, right?" Then somebody else said, "Well, is that the combined IQs of Greg Shelton, Teddy Lester, and Chad Joyce?" And I was like, "No, they're smarter than that." It's simply about handling our finances, guys. Giving 10% to the Lord first, saving 10%, and then living and having fun with the other 80. And look, y'all know me. I want to see everybody in this church eat, okay? I love it. I love it when I see people in our church roll in with a new truck or a new car or a new boat. You should not care how somebody spends their money, okay? As long as they give the first 10% to God in some way, shape, or form. As long as they save the next 10%, have fun, use the last 80%. Because, hey, you only got one life to live, right? And you're not guaranteed tomorrow. And so that's the principles, and this is tried and true. This 10-10-80 has been around for generations. Christian financial advisors and non-Christian advisors preach this. Whether they believe in God or don't, all of them say, hey, live the 10-10-80 plan. Like I said, money is one of those topics that just elicits some very strong emotions. And so I'm going to be careful, but we're going to consult the Bible because the Bible has a whole lot to say about how we handle our money. Now, to get things out of the way, a tithe is 10% of one's income. An offering, or sometimes you hear it called a free will offering or a love offering. An offering is anything above and beyond the 10%, okay? And so the importance of giving back to God goes way back. The first two children that were born to Adam and Eve, you remember they brought an offering to the Lord. By the way, Chad Holt, great communion meditation. You remember Cain, he bought back some fruits. Abel bought back the first fruits, the firstborn of his flocks. That required a huge sacrifice. In Genesis chapter 28, verse 22, you remember Jacob vowed to give 10% of all his property to God. And so this is very biblical, and it goes all the way back to the Old Testament. And so today, I'm going to be brief because it's money and nobody wants to hear about it. But I want to challenge us very briefly to continue. Notice I said continue. Not to become givers, but to continue. Because you in this church, for generations, have been amazing with your giving. And so I'm not challenging y'all to become givers. I'm just going to challenge all of us in this room, myself included, to continue to be givers. Like every parent, I've had plenty of moments where I've been proud of my children. I've had plenty of moments where I've not been proud of them, to be honest, too. But I've had plenty of moments to be proud of all of my children. I was looking back, I told you I got my desk calendar, and every day it's kind of like my diary. I write down who I visit, what I see, what's going on. As I was going back through them, I was reminded that in 2009, me and Xavier and Xander were shopping at Walmart. See, it was in Christmas of '09. We were supporting a family, like we do every year, that had 5 kids that had been through a hard time. And so I took Xavier with me shopping. Xander was just a baby in the stroller, so he couldn't really do much. But Xavier, we had 2 carts, one for clothes, one for toys. And Xavier, like a normal 4-year-old, was running around grabbing every toy he could get and throwing it in there. And I tried to explain to him that I had a budget. The church had given me $400 to spend on these kids. And he kept throwing these things in there. And I'm like, man, son, we ain't got enough money to buy all this stuff. And finally, Xavier said, well, just use my piggy bank. I was like, well, you ain't got enough money in your piggy bank. He said, use your money. You know, I was so proud that he wanted to spend his money, his piggy bank, on them kids. And as a father, in those moments, you're so proud of your son because you get, at least then, he got that it was more blessed to give than it is to receive. But this is what I want y'all to get. You are a child of God. And that's exactly what your Heavenly Father feels when you give back to Him. He feels that proudness. You know, if you want to put a smile on God's face, you know what you do? Well, like everything else, the Bible tells us what to do. In 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7, it says, each man should give what he has decided in his heart to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And so giving cheerfully to God makes God extremely happy. Now in Malachi, God promises incredible blessings to those who give. In Malachi chapter 3, verse 10, it says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that you will not have enough room for it. Now, I want you to pay attention to this verse because this is the only time in the entire Bible where God tells us to test Him in something. Now, while the tithe, the 10%, was the standard found in the Old Testament, generosity is the picture that we see in the New Testament when it comes to giving. And the church was told to give money when they came together. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 16, verses 1 and 2, it says, now about the collection for God's people. Do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of every week, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with his income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. You know, maybe as we start 2024, maybe you're not in the habit of giving. Well, that's okay. Start now. Sit down and decide what you want to share with the church or with charities or with people in need. You see, we're commanded in the Bible to give our first fruits off the top. You know, if you look at America, our problem in America is that our eyes are often bigger than our bank accounts are. I was reading some statistics. In 2022, the average American spent more money than what they made. Now, it does not take a genius to figure out that when that happens, 10% for giving or 10% for saving becomes a pipe dream. You see, we're to honor the Lord first and foremost in our lives, and the 10% is the starting place. Now, in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 9 and 10, it says, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." Now notice the promise here that God made. If they were willing to be faithful with their giving, God guaranteed that He would bless them. Now I got to thinking about, what's the number one reason that people don't give back to the Lord? And I think the number one reason, from what I've studied in my own life, is people have never really received biblical teaching on it. You know, as a church as a whole, not just this church, but all churches, I think that we cave in. And in our effort to not be labeled as a church that always talks about money, we're probably guilty of swaying to the opposite extreme. And that's my fault, not yours. But the Bible is filled with plenty of teaching about giving and stewardship and generosity. I think another reason or excuse for not tithing is selfishness. You know, when we committed our lives to the Lord, what we did is essentially we turned over the reins to Him. We gave Him the steering wheel. We're like, "Here, Lord, you drive the bus." Well, Jesus said in Matthew chapter 16, verse 24, "If anyone would come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." Well, that flies right in the face of selfishness. Also, I think we take care of our wants before we think about the Lord and His commands. And if we're not careful, what happens is we fall into this pattern of our eyes being bigger than our paycheck is. Now, I was thinking about it this week. What so easily happens to us is we begin to buy things that we don't need with money that we don't have to impress people that we don't like anyway. You know what I mean? We do it. We all do. I mean, that's just the way that it works. And if we're serious about being generous, then what we do is we need to take the focus off of ourselves and focus on other people. Another reason that some people don't give is because we're suffocated by debt. And I think we've all been there. You know, I believe 100% that most Christians want to give more, but debt stops us. You know, it's hard to give 10% when you can barely make the minimum payment on your credit card. It's hard to give 10% when you can't hardly make your house payment. And so what happens is we've got to be prudent. Think about what would happen if you had no debt except for a house payment, which is considered good debt. If you had no debt except for a house payment, how much more could we give back to the Lord? How much more could we help those in need? You know, just to be transparent, when I look back over my personal life, the years when my generosity sucked were the same years that my debt increased. And guess what? That's not a coincidence. It's biblical. Proverbs says, "The borrower is the slave to the lender." So if you're in debt, set a strategy at the beginning of this year. Get on a path to getting out of debt. But make certain that your plan begins with honoring the Lord first. Now somebody might be thinking right now, "That's crazy, Kurt. I'm already in debt. It's crazy to give to the Lord. It's just making my own problems worse." And I say, no, the opposite is true. All financial planners, all financial advisors, whether Christian or non-Christian, all say that generosity is the key to financial freedom. This is a healthy practice for every single one of us as we start this year, to evaluate your income, your expenses, your giving, your saving. Did you know, and this does not pertain to this church, but statistically, or generally speaking, it doesn't. Statistically speaking, the given average for American Christians in the church today is they give 2.5%. Can you imagine if everyone who came to church gave 10% for their offering? The offerings would triple. Well, the last reason that I want to look at for not tithing is it's a trust issue. The barrier for some people may be trusting in the leaders of the church. The question might be in their minds, are those who oversee the tithes and offerings wise stewards? I mean, after all, think about it. Y'all work hard for your money. You work long, hard hours to earn your incomes. I can tell you, if I don't trust somebody, I'm not giving them their money, my money. There is nothing wrong with GoFundMe, but I'd rather drive to Roanoke and give a family money and know that they're going to get all my money than a percentage of it. And so that's what I will do. So I know if y'all work so hard for your money, you ain't going to just flippantly give it to somebody that you don't trust. So it's a great question. And let me tell you, this church, the people in this church, and the leaders take great care in spending your hard-earned money. Our treasurer, Chad Joyce, does a great job in handling your tithes. And he is very smart with your money. He's not just any Joe handling the money. He handles a logging business that has been in existence at least 30 years, probably longer. So he knows what to do, how to handle it, how to be smart, and how to be wise. Our church is very wise in its spendings, and we have never ever had a single complaint, and we have never ever had a single problem. Do you know why? It is because we want to be good stewards of every single gift, however big or however small, because we have a higher authority than the government, and we have a higher authority than the IRS, who is watching us to see if we are being responsible. And when we are, as we have seen, God blesses us. So we give to honor God, and we give so that Mayo can continue to connect people to Jesus and to one another. As we close, Matthew chapter 6, verse 33 says this, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Seek first. That's the first fruits of your time. Your time is valuable, isn't it? Seems like there ain't enough time in the day to get done what we got to do. But we're to give of our time. Not only that, but as I was talking about Jessica, we are to give of our talents. God has uniquely blessed every single one of you in this room with at least one talent or ability. And if we do not use them, we lose them. And so we're to give of our time, our talent, and also our treasure. Because after all, they all belong to God. I remember 2011. I had just accomplished, by God's grace, a lifelong dream that I never thought would have. Darrell Lester is the only person that thought I would have this. I remember sitting in his living room in 2009, telling him how much I love cows and wanted a farm one day, and he looked at me and said, "One day you're going to have your own farm." And I was like, "I'm a preacher. We live in parsonages our entire lives." And he said, "One day it's going to happen." Well, 2011, like I said, by the grace of God, it happened. I remember I was so excited after I went to the bank and signed my life away. And Bill Brinegar drove into my driveway, and I thought he was coming to congratulate me. And he hugged me, and he said, I just want you to know that none of this belongs to you. It's God's, and He's just entrusted it to you as long as you're alive. I'm like, well, thank you, Bill. Thank you. But it was a very important lesson that day that I will never forget. Every single thing that we have is directly from God. And you're like, no, I work hard for my money. Yes, you do. Extremely hard. I see y'all. But who gave you the ability and the health and the life to be able to work? It all comes from God. Jesus says here, seek first His kingdom, and all the other things are going to be given to you. You know, you say, well, Kurt, what things? Food, clothing, shelter. He doesn't promise us that we're going to live in a mansion and drive a nice F-250, brand new. And He doesn't promise that you're going to eat at Applebee's or Pinto's every day of the week, okay? He simply assures you that if you honor Him first, He's going to take care of you. If you think about it, He has blessed us, every single one of us, with everything we need. And a whole lot more, hadn't He? He has. So as we close, tithing comes back to one simple question. It's a question of trust. Here's the question I want you to ask yourselves. Do I believe that 90 cents will go farther with God's blessing than a dollar will without God's blessing? Do I trust that when I give God my first fruits, that He's going to meet all my needs? As the girls come up here, you remember John chapter 3, verse 16? For God so loved the world that He what? He gave. He gave. And we never look more like Jesus than when we give. We never look like more Jesus in our lives than when we give. Right now, the girls are going to come out and close us in prayer. If you've never made that decision to make the Lord of your life, to give Him that steering wheel, to be baptized, now's your opportunity. Or maybe you want to rededicate your life. Or maybe you want to join us here at Mayo. Whatever your decision is, what a better day, what a better time than the first Sunday of the year to start off on that right track. Right now, we're going to stand up and we're going to worship. If you got a decision to make, you just meet me up front.